My guest today is filmmaker Eric Nazarian, and he has received the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences prestigious Nickel Fellowship in Screenwriting for his screenplay Giants. But in 2010, Eric made Bolus, a short film about a descendant of a genocide survivor in Istanbul, was part of the European Union's Capital of Culture program. But in 2017, his feature film Three Christ with director John Avnet featured, or I should say, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, starring Richard Gere and Peter Dinklage and Juliana Margulies and Walter Goggins. But we're here today to talk about his newest feature film, Die Like a Man, a gritty, character-driven thriller that follows Freddy, a teen desperate to prove himself to a local tribe of gangsters and pushed to complete a violent rite of passage on his 17th birthday to shoot a rehabilitated rival. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Eric Nazarian and his gripping portrayal of inner-city gang life in Die Like a Man to the show. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Ward. Lovely to be on your show. Appreciate your kind words.
You're very, very welcome. Now, I'm going to kick this right off. Where in the world did you get the inspiration for this incredible real-life drama of Die Like a Man?
As an Angelino, we emigrated to this country as refugees when I was 4 from the former Soviet Armenia. And we went through Columbus, Ohio. My family moved to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and then to L.A., in Northeast LA. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s when LA was a very different place, as much as the world was, because it was still analog. In that analog world of multi-ethnicity, of so many cultures coming into LA and finding root and finding home, LA became the Ellis Island of the West Coast. And during that process, a lot of unfortunate acts also began to work within the gang violence, the gun violence. LA was a very, very hot city at the time. And I grew up enamored by Atari and NWA and hip hop. And, I was a DJ in high school. We used to travel quite a bit and spin beautiful songs and records. And incidentally, I was named after Eric Burdon and the Animals' House of the Rising Sun. My father was a hippie in the Soviet Union, so he got into a lot of trouble. So pop culture and art and cinema was intrinsic to our home. It was on the kitchen table. It was at church. It was everywhere. My father was a film student and a cineast back in the old country. So movies were always just an integral part of the ecosystem. But whenever I'd leave the house, it was a different world out there on the street. And it was a world where, no matter how good your grades were in school or, how much homework you did with your parents, the street was a different world. And it was during what Father Greg Boyle at Homeboy Industry calls the decade of death. Between 88 and 98, you had about 10,000 gang-related homicides in LA. And this was the year, nobody was immune to this. So I survived quite a bit, unwittingly, kind of dumb luck. But a lot of friends didn't. A lot of friends who could have been great architects and artists and graphic designers. And so this really bothered me growing up. Then when I got into USC Film School, straight out of my first 2 years at college, the streets of LA were missing. And all the movies I loved, like Martin Scorsese's work from the 70s and Spike Lee and Sidney Lumet, I knew about New York from the movies, but I couldn't find that about LA. Everybody came to LA to make movies about everywhere else but LA. But I knew the street LA that I wanted to film. And ironically, the germ of the idea happened in 1998 when I was a junior at USC Film School studying film production. It was gladiator school because it was like the most competitive film school in the world, and we had to shoot so many films. And so I was a cinematographer and editor on my friend's film. And I went to downtown LA to photograph, the street vendor community under the shadows of these huge skyscrapers. And I was 19 and a half, 20 at the time. As I was getting ready to line up my mini DV camera, which was like a big thing back then, this kid just rolled up on me on a bicycle, and I remember him. He had a tank top on. He had these pimples on his face. He was very, very high. I don't know on what. But it was just a very cautious moment. He looked at me, he looked at my camera, and he flashed what looked like a 25 millimeter pistol, basically to kind of communicate to me like what the situation was. That was very, very haunting for me, but not as haunting as the fact that nobody else around me seemed to care. Like this was a normal thing. People were setting up shop, walking about, talking. Back then there were no cell phones. on the street. And so I just looked at this kid very nervously. That flash your life moment kind of sort of happened, but I noticed he had a tattoo on his neck of a gang that I recognized, because unfortunately LA school district was so screwed up then that they would bus all the kids to different parts of the valley from the central LA. And so I got to meet a lot of really cool people, who were from these neighborhoods, who were just stuck in this world they couldn't get out of. So luckily I recognized the name of the gang, and I very nervously said, "Hey, Sergio and Puppet are two of my friends. I know them from this and this." And he just looked at me like I was an alien. And he just like literally just pocketed the gun, grabbed the wheel, and then just pedaled away as if nothing ever happened. And I just looked around me. Nobody seemed to care. And it was just like a holy Jesus moment. I just literally ran to my Mazda, got in the car, and I just drove off. And I always wondered what happens to that kid. What was he going to do that day with that gun? Was he going to shoot somebody? Did he end up getting shot? Did he end up turning his life around? Is he doing a life sentence? And these are the things as a storyteller you live with, and it's fermentation. It's the marination of the meat before you start cooking the story. And I forgot about this kid. Years passed. In 2011, I had lost some family members, and it was just a very difficult time for me. And I was just clearing out the garage, and I saw my DV camera. And that DV camera triggered the memory of this kid. And that night, like, it just all made sense. A boy on a bicycle with a gun in his backpack and a mission. What could possibly go wrong? And then 14 years later, here we are talking about Die Like a Man.
Wow, that is so incredible. And since you are you're basically almost born and raised in LA.
Yeah.
How has gang life in LA now, especially with the inner city, how's it changed over the last 20, 30 years?
Well, gentrification has changed pretty much everything. I mean, technology now is both the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? It connects people, but it also creates access. There's a huge pipeline between prisons with cell phones, the shot callers on the boys on the street, those kites, so to speak. Kites are little notes in prison that gets passed around secretly with instructions. Like whether you're in Folsom or Soledad or San Quentin, it's one phone call, one text, and you can control it that way. So of course a lot has changed since the 80s and 90s, a ton. Very much. I think real estate and development and gentrification has a lot of ills and a lot of evils because it kicks people out of their communities, and ultimately what happens is it ends up erasing these generations. Once every 7 years you see a complete shift where the previous generation has no clue about the future generation. Hence maybe that explains why that kid was looking at me like I was some alien. Just the fact that I knew the name of his neighborhood was enough for him to not shoot me, basically. Now, I think again, gentrification is a key part. I think now there's different types of activities. In 2023, we had like 1,400 shootings in LA, which is a lot. It doesn't get reported. So unfortunately, we don't have the barometer that we did in the nightly news back in the day, which both vilified and antagonized these kids. And a lot of these people are born into a system where they can't get out of. Others are basically trapped. So we've done a horrible job as a city to understand the root causes of this. But also, as a country, I think we're in a critical tipping point. Like, are we past the point of no return with gun violence? Or is it something that can still be fixed? Because, every January for the last few years, there's been more registered shootings in this country than there are calendar days in the year. And so this is all trickle down effect. And we have to talk about the root causes of the violence, which is what I was interested in. I was not interested in the trigger finger of Freddy. I was interested in the battlefield between his ears, the hearts and minds.
And that's what makes this film absolutely brilliant in its storytelling. Because in this film, you show multiple sides of the inner city life in LA. So I was working and I was making some notes because I've noticed that there are the youth who want to belong to something.
Mhm.
There are those who grew up and lived, but leave behind memories that they would like to forget. And those, well, they would like to tell today's youth not to go down the same path.
Mhm.
And you mix all of these types of ideas, memories, and storylines into this film. And there is just this, how how would I call it? A cinematic synergistic effect.
Wow. Thank you, Ward. That's beautiful. I love how you very organically distilled the emotional layers of these characters into that beautiful sentence you just said. Thank you so much. I hadn't heard that one before, honestly. So thank you. That was the point. The whole point for me was to show, if I could make a film that could take a kid who's just on the precipice and can think about the regret that's going to follow his act and then convince him not to do this. That was my intrinsic hope. Now, two things happened that really, really shocked me when I was making the movie. My first cut, my dear friend Jesse Katz, who just won the LA Times book prize for The Rent Collectors, which is ironically in that same area where the incident happened to me in 1998. When he saw the film the first time, it was the first cut, September of 2021. We shot it right in the middle of COVID. It was insane. What this film went through is the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and we're still standing. But Jesse just wholeheartedly just bawled his eyes out because he had seen all. He was the gang reporter for the LA Times in the 80s and 90s. He had seen this all. And in a very beautiful way, it's a complementary to his book, The Rent Collectors. If you get a chance, please read it because it's profound. He's like the John Steinbeck of LA, nonfiction. And the second one was probably the most haunting experience of my life. Was we screened the film very quietly for a group of moms who had lost children to gun violence. And this was still while the paint was still wet because I was still trying to beat up the idea to death and see if it sticks. And we finished the screening. It was this heavy mood in the room. I was very uncomfortable. I was very nervous. And these big brawny guys who'd done 10, 15 years were there just like sweating through their clothes. And this mom just walks up to me and just hugs me and just starts bawling. And she says, I wish the kid that murdered my boy like 6 months ago had seen your film the night before. Maybe he would have changed his mind. And to me, it was the maybe. The fact that film has the power to maybe change your life, even 1 millimeter, 1%.
Yeah, it's the maybe, and I saw the maybe, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna hold my thought for the next few minutes on that one because I don't want to get ahead of myself on this film.
Sure.
But I don't want to spoil it either. So I want everyone to see this film, but without giving too much away.
Right.
But there is something that, because I'm not from LA, I grew up in a small town. I mean, I would call it white people America. So we don't know what gang life is, and and so, but so we're going to choose inner city LA, and you show this in the film. But how do youth, or I should say, why do youth, male youth, get caught up in the gang life to prove their masculinity, to prove their manhood? They're still kids, and who are becoming the voices in their head.
The very same reason why there were the Montagues and the Capulets, the very same reason why there was the Hatfields and McCoys, the very same reason why, there was Wyatt Earp and the Cowboys. This is a story of a human global mindset of masculinity that becomes machismo, that becomes destruction, that becomes chaos. So the point is of belonging, of group membership. I did not make a film about gangs. I did not make a film about drugs. I did not make a film about the bang bang of it all. I wanted to make a film about the rite of passage that is intrinsic and universal to human nature, to men, to boys. Why is it in whether it's the Taliban, whether it's the Navy SEALs, whether it's the Crips and the Bloods, whether it's the Vice Lords, whether it's Little Italy, whether it's the Maori warriors of New Zealand, why is it universally intrinsic in patriarchies for boys to prove and become men through the rites of blood and violence? This is
Yeah,
really
it and you did. I mean, and that's really the central part of this film, and I've never seen it done so perfectly.
thank you, sir.
Because as I'm following Freddy, you put him in different situations. You put him in the presence of certain people, and you see this mental you see this mental, almost an inner spiritual struggle within Freddy. If you really look at him as a character, and if you even looked at him as a real person, he is completely lost.
Yes.
A lot of that goes to the fact that his father is in prison, so he's not growing up with a role model. The role model is the neighborhood, and the
Yes.
neighborhood isn't becoming a godly or a good role model, because what there's that scene with him and his mother when she went to, bought him food at some fast food place, and they're sitting there in the booth. What broke my heart was she matured. She knew the mistake she made, but she understands what it's like to at least have a dream. Not that you're pursuing it, but there's life outside the neighborhood. Freddie, for being a 17-year-old kid, what shocked me was he had no idea what a dream really was, or even thinking of that there's a world, maybe even a better world outside that neighborhood. Yeah, he had the dream of the car wash, which I thought, okay, at least there's this little glimmer of hope that is within him. But can he focus on that long enough and put aside those elements of the neighborhood that are going to drag him down or end his life? And
Yes.
you bring forth this incredible struggle, because it is an emotional, physical, spiritual struggle within Freddy, all wrapped into one.
Man, I hope to God you write a book one day, because this is exactly all the subtext of the notes and notes I've made for years. And you hit a word that I love that we don't use enough in society anymore: spiritual. The greatest art, whether it's Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, William Faulkner's Sound and the Fury, Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, Frida Kahlo's paintings, Georgia O'Keeffe, name it. The greatest art in the world speaks to us because of a spiritual subtext and a catharsis that transcends language, culture, politics, borders. And this is why art is the most profound gift to mankind, to understand their humanity. And so for me, making this film was to really make a film that was split like an orange. The first half of the film is about brainwashing and machismo. The editing reflects that. We were cutting with my dear beloved brother Luis Guillermo Navarro in Guadalajara, Mexico. We were cutting according to performance, not according to shot, reverse shot, because we wanted to capture that masculine energy, that testosterone. The moment we hit the midpoint in the film, and we have an event, that shifts the gears, then it becomes a story about a spiritual quest of the young man who does not realize the magnitude of what he's experiencing. And through that, the spirituality of these three other men who have been down that road comes to the fore in a way that you don't ever imagine, because we're always, no matter how much we're taught this in grade school, civilization and society continues to judge a book by its cover. We are seeing this in every aspect of our society, from boardrooms to boardwalks, you name it. We judge prematurely. And my hope as a filmmaker is very simple. Please ask, don't assume. And watching this film, what the hope was, what you see in Sam's character, played by the brilliant Frankie Loyal, in that scene in the doorway when he talks about, his life and his long monologue. When you see the ghost silent in the alley that confronts Freddy near the shrine. And when you see Boxer, one of our pivotal supporting characters, you're seeing these men struggling with who they become because of what they couldn't accept what they were. And
Yeah, and see, that leads into one of the most, for people who do not live in LA, for people who don't understand inner city gang mentality, which you portray very perfectly in this film. Like you said, this isn't about drugs. This isn't about popping people off. This is about masculinity. It's manhood. It's a young person struggling to find his place. Unfortunately, he's picking the wrong place.
Mhm.
But the shocking thing to me was the aspect of the film was Freddy's mentality as well as his rival. You know, when he and his little rival kind of had the little tussle in the park,
Mhm, mhm.
it was that conversation that was so shocking to me. To that both of them were looking forward to going to prison, which was the
Yes.
dumbest thing I'd ever heard. And I was sitting here going, does that mentality actually exist? And then I'm thinking, okay, if they pull off an act and most likely murder and get sent to prison, are you lucky enough you're going to be out in 10 to 15? Or are you going to end up being a lifer? And how long does it take you to realize, why was I so dumb?
Yes. Yes. So the tragedy is when I was getting ready to apply to USC Film School and UCLA and Cal Arts and New York School Film School, Tisch School of Arts, I was 17, 16 at the time, preparing, my lessons. My father, I had a real god of a father who was my mentor, my everything. Very much like Cinema Paradiso. He was the projectionist, I was Toto, right? Like this idea of cinema as a spaceship to do whatever you wanted in this world. My friends and my classmates didn't have that. They were good people who had to get up at 4 a.m., be at the bus stop at 5 in order to go an hour and a half on the LA traffic to a school in the valley, and then go back home at 3:30 p.m., arrive home at 6, then maybe can do their homework while there's gang shootouts going on their block. So I saw the horror, I saw the sociology of what made these kids who they became. I was bound for university, film school, talking about applying to the Cal States and the Ivy Leagues, and USC was my dream because of all my heroes that went there. And they were during lunchtime talking about, yeah, Folsom and Soledad and prison. Like eventually one day we're gonna end up there, like, and this was, even as a teen, it always just left my heart broken because of the reality that they were not given a choice to understand. They were not given a choice. They didn't have a society that cared where they would end up in. And so they were, of course, going to talk about the fact that, of course, one day I may have to do something to save my life. And that's going to give me 10, 15, or 20. Like whatever. Everybody's got to do time, right? It's what Sergio tells Freddy in that exact scene. So this was the tragedy. And since we did the theatrical that one week, I mean, I was having grown men who had been fresh out of the system just coming up after the screening again, like overwhelmed. In fact, one gentleman came up. He came out of the film halfway, and I was just like joking. I said, "Man, did you hate it that much?" He goes, "I can't." He goes, "I can't. This is my son's life. This is my life. I have to come back for the night screening." So I said, "Please come back. You don't need to buy a ticket again." So the guy came back for the second half because he couldn't take the movie in at once.
Well, let's go back to the spiritual aspect real quick because it's one of the biggest things that I noticed in his film.
Yeah.
But what I loved about it was that it's true to life. Now, and I'm going to use Freddy's back tattoo as an example. God versus Satan. There's the good one. There's the good of you. There's the good in you, and then there's the bad in you, and he's portraying both. So in the home, I know that his mother still had a positive influence on him because he walked around with his rosary,
Right.
and but it was the things that he would say, and but then it was that when he knelt down beside his bed and he was praying, and I was like, he doesn't know. And I'm like, he doesn't know that one of the 10 commandments says, thou shalt not kill.
Right.
You can be visually religious. It's kind of like what Jesus said. Some seed falls on rocky soil
Mm-hmm.
and it never takes root.
Mm-hmm.
He was rocky soil. So, but he was clinging on to something positive, but he didn't understand because he didn't know, let's just say he didn't know what the word said. Because if he did, he may have not thought that. But his prayer was so true to life because it was a battle of good versus evil within the prayer. And I was just like, oh my gosh, millions of people pray like that. And it took me back because I'm like, it's almost like I wanted to reach through the freaking screen, Eric, and go, no,
Yes.
God doesn't want you to do this. He wants you to live and prosper and do good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a darkness that's blocking the light that you can't see.
Dear God, I'm sorry if what I'm about to do is not right, but I gotta do it for my neighborhood.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. This is why I love Johnny Cash, and he's a major inspiration in my life, especially the American recordings that he did with Rick Rubin. I was listening to a lot of like the number 13, the spiritual, like these songs that he sang, you know, a bad luck wind been blowing at my back. I was born to bring trouble wherever I'm at. Got the number 13 tattooed on my neck, all this. And so the duality of what you're talking about, Ward, is so profound because this is our life. There is the black and the white and the 17,000 shades of gray in between. And it took me a while to realize that the iconography, and I'd done this intrinsically because I am a spiritual being. I believe all human beings are. And you see this in the prisons, you see this on the street, you see this in the boardrooms. We are spiritual beings as human beings, whether we like it or not, whether it's going to take you 50 years or 90 years or 20 years. There's going to come a point where you're going to ask yourself, why am I here on this earth? Why am I in a cell? Why am I in a boardroom? Why am I in a spaceship? What is that thing that unites humanity, which is the spirit, the foundation of life? And with the biblical iconographies, I mean, you have the Virgin Mary, the Guadalupe on the wall.
Mhm.
You have the Christian iconographies. You have the Rosary, but also he's praying to the gun, not the good book.
Right. Yeah,
Right? He's on.
because he's already, because when you hear the prayer, he's already made up his mind.
Yes.
He's trying to justify to God. And
Exactly.
God doesn't God doesn't move in the areas of justification because he's
Yes.
like, I would rather have you hot or cold, not lukewarm, because
Yes.
lukewarm is dangerous. And that's the thing about this film. You have this incredible balance. There is this is what I was saying before we got started the interview. There is the story behind the story is the battle of good and evil within Freddy.
Yes.
And we see those in the film that in a way are like angels. We see those that have in a way found redemption, but they're dealing with their memories. And then we
Yes.
see Satan. That's Solo. And all of this is coming in at Freddy. Freddy wants something. He doesn't know what he wants because he's a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
This film is so powerful because it's my favorite. I have only two favorite style films. One, I love period pieces, and I love character driven.
Mm-hmm.
This is a character driven film. Now, what I did was I went in and took some notes because there are very strong scenes in this film. That's the interactions between Freddy and his mother. Everybody needs to pay attention to those. And it's the second one that is just a stellar performance, especially from her. Then there's the
Yes.
interaction between Freddy and Sam, which you mentioned, which that one, oh my goodness, everybody better they better pay attention to every word Sam says.
Yes.
Then there's that one between Freddy and Boxer. And see, the one with Freddy and Boxer, and people you have to have a quick eye to understand there's this tiny little element. And so Freddy has a Band-Aid on his hand. He's trying to hide something that he wished he never did.
Yes.
And so I went online and I'm like, okay, what does the cross mean between the thumb and the forefinger? And I went, oh. And Boxer knew. You can cover that up with a Band-Aid, but it ain't going away. You could take the tattoo off, but it's not going away. So that scene between Freddy and Boxer is gold, Eric. It is gold. But but then I started looking at other elements because I noticed that one was that it shows the difference between immaturity and maturity, as well as foolishness and wisdom. For you, why was it important to show all of these types of important differences in the film?
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, you're nailing every single Easter egg that I planted in this film. Especially that scene. Let's just begin with Boxer and Freddy, the Band-Aid. If you notice, Boxer has the same exact tattoo on his wrist between his thumb and his forefinger. And that's a real tattoo. That's a real tattoo coming from lived experience. But you see, the young buck who thinks in a one-liner, this film for me is about a deer who desperately wants to become a wolf, but he learns a terrible lesson about self-deception because he's trying to fit into another man's version of what manhood and masculinity means. And these scenes were so important to me because, again, they talk about the light. You mentioned Lucifer and Satan in Solo. Lucifer was once an angel.
That's right.
So the humanity of what Solo went through. I mean, he says, at one point in time, he's teaching a kid how to shoot a gun and kill a man, but the kid can't put on a condom, right? He has this problem, right? And at the same time, after he does the deed, he berates the kid, his disciple, for being disrespectful to his mother, and that you have to make things right with your mom because you die for your neighborhood, but you've got only one mother. So to me, the films that work the best, it's like what William Faulkner said in his Nobel Prize speech in the 50s. He said, I'm interested in the human heart in conflict with itself. And every single one of these characters in Die Like a Man manifest a small micro version of that for me because character driven, as you mentioned, Ward, is so profound because all the great films, The Godfather is not about the mafia. It's about a man who's afraid of losing his family. It's King Lear, with a Tommy gun. It's not about it's about when Michael goes to his mom and says, was dad ever afraid of losing his family? That's what this film's about.
But
And
you show this good and evil situation with Solo. Solo tells Freddy, "Don't be disrespecting your mother. Your mother loves you. You always take care of your mother." But then there is that scene, and Solo does the absolute freaking opposite. Freddy's mother shows up, and Solo, I hate to say it, he's an asshole to her and
yes,
tells and just berates her. And I'm like, do you realize that Freddy is standing around the corner? He has every
yeah,
right to come up and kick your ass.
absolutely. Hence, this is what Walt Whitman said about, I reserve the right to contradict myself. I contain multitudes. But what Solo does is hypocrisy, because this is the tragedy of the Fagins of the world and the Oliver Twists, the mentors and the disciples. We see this vicious malevolence that exists, that, again, self-deception, right? Solo is as self-deceptive as Freddy is, but they're two different intrinsic worlds here.
Yeah, but here's what you did with Solo, and I hope people notice this because I noticed it right off.
Mm-hmm.
You put this underlying insecurity within Solo. On the outside, he's acting like he's all tough and like he told Freddy, I am God. And so he's trying to put off like, I'm the king of the neighborhood. I run this joint, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you're like the most insecure person out of the whole group.
Yes.
And it's those types of people that when they become a bad influence, other people pay the price.
Absolutely.
And you
And
showed that.
thank you, sir. I mean, everything you said, especially the quote from Jesus, I always look at the saying in the Bible, the rain falls on the just and unjust alike. And what this child does, this child is not a bad child. This child does not deserve to be condemned to death or in prison for the rest of his life. He makes a mistake based on a mindset where if this whole film took place in a boot camp, Solo would be the hero because he's teaching him to go and kill, right? But if it takes place on the street, then the moral spectrum and the moral litmus test changes because ultimately the tragedy of these fallen people is like Hubert Selby once said, even the characters you hate, you have to write with love because that's how you bring the humanity out from them, right? There's no such a thing as complete evil human being. There's rules, there's circumstances. Of course, there's insanities everywhere. And we unfortunately are seeing this on a rate that we've never seen because we have so much access now to technology and presence. But for me, it was really, this is Los Angeles has a lot of lost angels, and this film has to do not that necessarily that they're stuck between the winds like John Wayne says, in like the end of The Searchers, but like they're people who could have had a foundation, who probably did have a foundation. But the tragedy is, as a society, this is where the burden falls on everybody, because that's why I casted 19 former inmates and system impacted individuals who played in these roles. The mom was a first timer. The three, the three guys that jumped Freddy in the alley, De Niro, those are all first timers. I trained in the Stanislavski system for a year during COVID because we got shut down. So we just started talking about representation versus embodiment and how I can tailor their lives to fit the character. I mean, I shot the whole film in the house of the mom, Berenice, who plays Mabel, because she was helping me to cast the movie. And she pulled me aside and said, "This is my life. Are you spying on me? Like, we've barely met." And she goes, "I have a Freddy at home. Please come to my house. Please see like what I'm living through. And please, can I try out for this role?" I said, "Absolutely." So I said, she had raw passion and talent and experience, but she had no technique. So I had to train her in technique over a period. And that was the gift horse of COVID, which was horrific for all of us in the world. But we had a chance to marinate. We had a chance to really sew the dress. And my grandmother, rest in peace, was this phenomenal Armenian carpet weaver who would weave these tapestries that your jaw would drop. And it was always fitting the pattern to the carpet, not the carpet to the pattern. Just like a dress. You go to a tailor to get suited, right? You get to wear what's specific to you. I can't just fit you into a medium or a large or an extra large. And filmmaking is tailoring the script to the agency and the strengths of the actors and making the best out with them, and also working on their weaknesses so you can bump that up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, her performance is fantastic. But
Yeah.
Sam,
Yeah.
let's talk about that scene with Sam when he comes to Freddy's room, because he wants to say something.
Yeah.
And he gets it out. What was your mindset in creating that scene?
I just really wanted to, in Sam, it was almost like this, again, this lost soul who has found a rock to cling on after being at sea for so long. And it was this character. I mean, I wrote this film in three drafts. The first two draft, Boxer died. I mean, there's the incident that happens, but Sam's character to me was like some of those great films from the 50s and 60s. Like, to me, Frankie Loyal is one of the most profound actors of his generation. He's become a dear brother of mine since we made this film. And he went online. We talked about how he prepared for this. I mean, he didn't eat or drink water, very little water, for 3 days preparing for that scene that we shot. And he talks about it in our Instagram live conversation that we just did a week ago. But for me, Sam was someone who has been through his own emotional D-Day, and he's still trying to figure out the wreckage, the blowback of what he's caused on people's life. And he's seeing himself in this child. But because, again, he has a dual nature, he's hitting himself when you first see him, and you're like, Jesus Christ, what an asshole. That's the way you're behaving. And then you're like, this man is just absurd. He's just sitting there drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, and on his, like, what are you doing with your life? Get up off your ass and go get a job, right? And then you see the whole point of this man's presence was that he was seeing himself in Freddy reflected. And so that moment, the monologue that I had written, Frankie had been through so many experiences like that in his life. He just celebrated yesterday his 23 years sober, and he's a remarkable, phenomenal thespian who's got a heart of incredible beauty. And when he read this script, when we met, I was like, and I could see he read between the lines of that monologue, and he knew exactly what Sam was going through. So he added some of the prayers and tears. And those were things that came out in that moment. And I think his performance is as Oscar worthy as Montgomery Clift's in Judgment at Nuremberg. That's 7 minutes. I really, really hope to God that this man and these amazing actors get their due, and that they get some attention in the bigger screen, because we're a fully independent film, and we're the little engine that didn't compromise anything, made it 100% from the street, John Cassavetes style. But for me, it was a great exhale. What Frankie did in that scene was an exhale of what he'd been holding inside him for so long. And you see Freddy's reaction is starting to turn, and that may very well be probably like the scene that on my dying day I'll remember. Like that was between the script, the struggle, and the end result. Like it transcended my expectations on levels I can't describe.
Yeah, it's that scene is so incredible, but it's that scene is backed up with the scene with Freddy and Boxer,
Yes.
because Boxer was like, and he says it in the film, I knew one day that day was going to come.
Yes.
You can be redeemed, delivered, you get your life straight, but he goes, your past is coming.
Yeah.
You did it. There's probably somebody you ticked off, and they're coming. But of course, he didn't see the way in which Freddy came, because the way Freddy came, I'm just like, Solo was puffing out his chest on the whole situation.
Yes.
Because Solo didn't really need, because Boxer wasn't really a rival. He was trying to pick up something out of the past to make himself look good, but not necessarily look good in the neighborhood, look good to his little miniature army around him. Because I'm like, dude, that's not even worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Boxer knew. He goes, regardless who it was, that ghost bullet's coming.
Yeah. And this is kind of the subtitle of the film, right? The ghost bullet. The things that, unfortunately, I'm really interested in two themes as a filmmaker that have been prevalent in all my films, including a small short film I made that was co-sponsored by the UN in Pine Ridge about the Oglala Lakota mothers of the missing and murdered indigenous women. And it's called Tatanka. But it was like, for me, the pain and its relationship to healing is probably the most perennial theme I'll ever work with. It was every story in my first film, The Blue Hour, was about that, but it was 93 minutes with 5 minutes of dialogue. Because again, going back to a spiritual portrait in cinema, with Die Like a Man, again, it's about this relationship. How do we change in our relationship between pain and healing, that spectrum? And how we affect each other's lives without realizing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Uh, when I was focusing on Freddy from the beginning into the end of this film, I want to know because Freddy is the actor is Miguel Angel Garcia. He's very intense in this film. How did you direct him? Because he had this internal anger in him that he seemed to use in the film to prove his character's manhood. But he carried that internal anger from the very opening scene to the very end.
Yeah.
How was he able to pull that off?
Miguel Angel Garcia, as he would say, is to me uh, a prodigy. He has such range. He is every bit as talented as River Phoenix, as Marlon Brando, as young Al Pacino. And that's not to blow smoke or to wax the car, so to speak, but his dedication to craft is unmatched. I mean, we spent because he wasn't from this world, and for me, it's like Anthony Quinn in Zorba the Greek. He's Irish Mexican, but he plays the best Greek character in the history of Hollywood cinema, right? So for me, this is the power of cinema. Take somebody who has no clue or concept of what that world is, throw him off the cliff, and help him grow wings on the way down. Which ironically was he has his wings tattoos, which is I found out in hindsight. I realized I was channeling the myth of Icarus, flying too close to the sun and collapsing. But these are the beauties of creativity. But to answer your question, Ward, dedication and absolute blind devotion to carrying that boat up the mountain like Werner Herzog in Fitzcarraldo. Like I first of all, I talked to Father Greg Boyle, who's a dear friend of mine and a dear inspiration, who created Homeboy Industries. And so I took Miguel down there 5, 6, 7 months before we shot, just to get into the life, to talk to the real people who had been system impacted, who had been to prison, who were in gangs. And he spent a lot of time there because he wanted the community to accept him. And that's the power of his integrity. He's like my brother for life. We're going to do many, many more films together, God willing. But the level of focus that he had, I mean, for example, with the tattoos, going to these nightclubs, going out with Luna, Mariel Molino, who does an excellent job as Luna and the conscience of the story. But with Miguel's focus on doing whatever it took, again, going back to like Stanislavski and Stella Adler, I mean, my favorite director of actors of all time is Elia Kazan. And Elia Kazan is like, I've read every book he's written, like John Cassavetes, Kazan, Sidney Lumet. These were like monster directors of actors. And so I just told Miguel, I said, we're doing this fully independently. I don't have to answer to anybody. Let's just go all the way. Let's just leave everything on the court, not take one drop of sweat back to the locker room. And so I got him, my dear friend James Lopez, retired chief of the LA Century Station, Sheriff's Department. He got us in to go to the Men's Central Jail just before COVID shut the world down. We got a chance to walk the line. Miguel saw all these inmates. One was praying, one was bowing, one was speaking. He saw the silence. He saw the sound of the metals. He saw where Freddy was headed. It gave him such a 4D, not 3D experience. And then right after that, I took him to Chino, to the shooting range where Jim taught him how to shoot a 38, how the kick is, what it does. And so immersion, there is research. There are actors and there are artists who do research, which is a term I don't like. And then there are artists who do footwork. And it's the footwork where it requires you to walk in the minefield, to be very careful and also understand the world of what you're entering. And with COVID shutting us down, that was probably the only good thing. And I said, we spent 5 months preparing, and we were supposed to shoot the day the world shut down. And it was horrendous. It was emotionally eviscerating. I lost everything. I had to repackage everything, go after everything from scratch. But I had the locations, I had the camera package, I had the actors, and it was like, hurry up and wait. Oh.
Well,
So,
you told me about the reactions of mothers and grown men. What's been the reaction from young people?
the same. I mean, nowadays you get to read this online. You see the comments, you see the emails, you see the direct messages people send you. Hey, this young lady just sent me a film that her brother, who's doing 50 to life in prison, worked on in prison. and was like, hey, this film really, really finally gave voice to what we go through as family members, trying to pull our men away from the cliff's edge, away from the sharks. But it's been really, really profound. I mean, and I also think one of the things that was important for me setting it in Venice and the West Side is, Venice Beach Boardwalk is the number 2 attraction in California next to Disneyland. And yet there's this whole world in the shadows nobody knows about. These are 5, 6 generations going back to 1911. Black and brown were living side by side for all these generations. And movies about LA don't really reflect the black and the brown and the multi-ethnicity when it comes to the street movies. It's always either the black gangsters or the Mexican gangsters or the Asians or the Armenians, whether it's in TV shows or whether it's in films. There's always this villainization of colored people, people of color. And for me, this really is a problem. I'm trying to decolonize that. And by making real people, training real people, who are from these communities, bringing them into my family and giving them a chance to really show their humanity. And that was something that I think a lot of the kids, probably like late teens, early 20s, in some of their testimonials, that's on the Instagram site, were like, talking about, which was a real relief to me, because I want to make, as Americans, we're at our best when we are most open, when we are most integrative. Once we start to segregate on any level, it's the beginning of the end. And this is the lesson we're learning over and over again, generationally. So for me, it's about smashing the gates open and creating opportunities. I created this program, Integrating Cinema Communities, which was basically film as a driver for social change, by integrating academia and activism, partnering with nonprofits to enable them, do screenings to help them build media literacy as a deterrent to gun violence. So I did all this independently. So hopefully, now that the film is out, hopefully on the next one, we can attract some more support to be able to train 90 people and not 19, and the next one 900, and go district wide and nationwide, because there's hunger. There's people that really genuinely are looking at the cell phone as the agency tool to be able to tell their stories and
Yeah,
have healing.
this is a film that is a very powerful social impact film.
Yeah.
This isn't a film that's just for people in LA. This is for people in the south side of Chicago. This is for people in New York. This is for neighborhoods that, well, they need to change, and we need the right change. We don't need real estate developers creating the change.
Exactly. To your point, sir, Corey Hardrick is from the south side of Chicago. And when he plays solo, I said, Corey, bring all of your humanity into it. And he squeezed that lemon dry. I mean, and Corey is a teddy bear. He's one of the most brilliant, he's another Lee Marvin. He's another Marlon Brando.
Well, I recognized him the moment he came on screen, and I love the mixture here, because you have seasoned actors, you have first timers. I love watching first time actors where, one day they're minding their own business and the next day they're in front of the camera and they don't know how they got there, but they pull off some of the most stunning performances. And this is a film that can it can inspire and encourage and motivate the dreams in young people. Not just the story, but the story behind the story, to where maybe young people are like, wait a minute, I could be a filmmaker. I could be an actor. And this is that type of film. It's funny because the Lords of Dogtown was mentioned in the film. And when it was, I went, oh, wait a minute. I said, this is like heaven versus hell. This is black versus white. And then I went, wait a minute. This is Lords of Dogtown versus Die Like a Man. I said, you have a film that we all love. My kids would come home every day from school, and they must have watched Lords of Dogtown every day for a year. And then when I saw Die Like a Man, I'm like, it's the complete opposite. We go from fun, cool stuff, but we're going to 1,000 times far to the other side of being gritty, being real, being dark. And I just love this film.
Thank you. That means a lot. I mean, to me, the darkness is what has to become the purpose to finding light. Everything we do in our lives, whether we switch on a light in this room or in your studio, whether we step outside the house, it is again the dusk till dawn, the magic hour. Terrence Malick, one of my biggest inspirations, finding those magic moments that can capture your humanity without vilifying the tragedies that people have to overcome to be considered part of a tribe. And this is, I really respect what you've said. It's a profound meditation on the film, and I just can't thank you enough.
Well, you're very welcome. Well, tell me really quick, what is the Grassroots Cinema for Social Change program?
The Grassroots Cinema for Social Change program was basically, I started this in 2006 with the blessing of Father Greg, because my film, The Blue Hour, I wanted to make a film in Pico Aliso village, which was the area where he built the foundations of Homeboy. It was one of the poorest parishes in the United States west of the Mississippi. And he had 8 rival gangs that were fighting each other in the 80s, that he was on one bicycle trying to negotiate a truce. I mean, that would make an amazing film in and of itself. Jesuit priest on a bicycle trying to make peace with 8, enemy gangs. And I just went to Father Greg and I said, I just want to shoot locally. I want to hire locally. And I was 29 at the time. Like, I was just like, I just want to make a movie about LA without dialogue. And it premiered at San Sebastian Film Festival. But the roots of that was essentially creating everything now is cinema, what Jean-Luc Godard said in the 50s. Everything you do now has an aspect of audiovisual narrative and storytelling. Your cell phone, the fact that we're here talking, in 2 different time zones, Central and Pacific, everything is cinema. So now that the democratization of technology has created this ubiquitous nature of narrative that is now billed as content, people are seeing the cinematic gene come out inside of them. No different than if you're reading a good book, you see the apples of Thomas Hardy, or you see, the Snopes family in Faulkner's books, So I wanted to create a program where film can be a driver for social change. With Die Like a Man specifically, if I could inspire kids to put down the gun which shoots to kill and pick up a movie camera which shoots to immortalize, this would be kind of like a pilot project. And then hopefully on the next film, we can find more funding so that I can actually have an educational component built where I can partner, 10 kids at risk, or whether it's about refugees or it's about, drug violence or gun violence, 10 kids partner with cinematographers, editors, producers, learn the craft, get paid on the job, and basically build a workforce. Hopefully AI won't wipe us all out and we can do that.
I absolutely love that. And ladies and gentlemen, Eric Nazarian's Die Like a Man is what cinema is all about, depicting real life. The film is set in the heart of a rapidly gentrifying West Los Angeles neighborhood, still reeling from decades of guns and gang violence across the 4 corners near Venice. A working-class single mom desperately tries to wean her 17-year-old son Freddy away from a veteran gangster who has become a father figure to him. Die Like a Man explores the rites of passage and codes of masculinity that are at the forefront of our current era's invisible force, as well as the acceleration of gentrification and its effect on communities in LA today. Now, the film co-stars Miguel Angel Garcia from the TV series Promised Land and Mariel Molino from NCIS Origins as Luna, who gives a stellar performance, but she sees who Freddy could be. And the film was shot entirely in LA's inner city neighborhoods with real community ties, including a partnership with Father Gregory Boyle's Homeboy Industries and Bernice Molina's From the Street to the Sets. Now, Die Like a Man is a must-see film for both young people and adults. This film can change lives, it can change neighborhoods, and helps to define what real manhood is, and it's not holding a gun. I loved this film because it shows how impressionable young people are today, and we need more mature, wise adults to stand up and then end up leading them in the right direction. A direction of following your dreams and knowing that you can go beyond your surroundings or help change your surroundings. This film is gritty, it's tense, it's heartbreaking, and believe it or not, it's full of wisdom if you take time to listen. There are lessons to be learned from this film, so make sure you add it to your list of must-see films. And Eric, I want to thank you for sharing this film with me today. Much success to you with Die Like a Man. And you're going to have to come back because I can't wait to see what you do next. And for everyone who is watching and listening, where can they see Die Like a Man right now?
Thank you again so much, Ward. I've absolutely had an amazing time speaking with you. You're brilliant. Your reading of the film is so layered, and I just want to wholeheartedly thank you for your deep, deep reading and your passion for this movie. The film is available now on Apple TV Plus, on Amazon Prime, on Fandango, on all the major streaming platforms. So it's out there into the world for all to see, and we're going to be continuing to rolling it out in different platforms, but I cannot wait to be back on your show, and thank you for being such a touchstone for great cinema and for being so perceptive in your comments. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you are very, very welcome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, Die Like a Man is a must-see film. It's drama. It's tense. You've got to see it. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's on Amazon Prime. You can watch it right now, so put it on your list. Again, it's a must-see, don't miss film. And for all of you, well, I want to thank you for watching and listening, ladies and gentlemen. Please visit us at bondoncinema.com, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our Bond on Cinema Prime show. And as for me, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.
Dear God, I'm sorry if what I'm about to do is not right, but I gotta do it for my neighborhood.
The homies call me Casper. Westlow's be where I'm from.
What do you want for your birthday? Don't buy any weed.
The neighborhood's been here way before my time. Back then it was the OG boardwalk gangsters of my pop's days.
It's like the Wild West out there back then. Me and your pops was brothers. Everything he schooled me on, I'ma teach you. You only got one chance in life to prove yourself. And that's it.
My boxer.
You ratted on my homeboy, Thumper.
Do I know you?
Everybody's got a number. And his number is up.
Either you stay under my roof and do what I tell you, or go with your homeboys and they could be your new family. Do you want to get out of here? Huh?
Do something, fool.
Back up.
Strong make the rules. That's the game.
So the cops came by your pad looking for you.
And when you're weak, you're guilty.
The game's been over a long time now, son. Ah!